Over the past few decades, millions of Muslims have become part of Western societies in America, the UK, France, Germany, and beyond. They've built families, opened businesses, become doctors, engineers, teachers, artists. Many of them are born here. They are Western citizens, but they also carry the spiritual legacy of Islam, a tradition that values humility, faith, and community. Now, Western culture has its own legacy: freedom, science, democracy, self-expression. But it's also facing an identity crisis. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche once said, "God is dead, and we have killed him." He didn't mean it literally. He meant that modern society had lost its sense of sacred purpose. When belief disappears, something else must fill the void. And often that something is consumerism, politics, or pure individualism. That's where the problem begins. Sociologist Emil Durkheim wrote that when a society loses shared moral values, people begin to feel what he called anomie, a sense of aimlessness, disconnection, emptiness. Look around today, the symptoms are everywhere. Rising loneliness, anxiety, political anger, social division. Western youth aren't just afraid of climate change or job loss. They're afraid of meaninglessness. They see adults working endlessly but rarely feeling alive. They scroll through endless content but rarely feel fulfilled. So when Muslims come into this environment, they enter a culture that's materially advanced but spiritually starved. And yet, Muslims themselves face challenges, balancing faith with modernity, tradition with change. Many struggle to explain who they are to societies that often view religion with suspicion. Still, integration is happening, quietly, imperfectly, but powerfully. In cities across the US and Europe, second and third generation Muslims live at the intersection of cultures. They are bilingual, digitally native, educated, and ambitious. They watch the same shows, use the same slang, go to the same schools. They're part of the Western story. But they also hold on to something their peers sometimes envy, a sense of identity that isn't constantly shifting with the latest trend. Western thinkers like Arnold Toynbee once said that civilizations don't die from outside attacks. They die from internal decay. The fall begins when a culture loses confidence in its own values. Toynbee argued that renewal often comes from creative minorities, small groups who bring new moral energy to an old civilization. Could Muslims in the West become that creative minority? It's possible. Because while Western culture questions everything, Islam still offers answers. It speaks about justice, responsibility, family, and the sacred value of life. These are not foreign ideas. They're the same moral foundations that once built the West itself. The philosopher Will Durant, who studied the rise and fall of civilizations, said, "A great civilization is not conquered from without until it has destroyed itself from within." So the question isn't, can Muslims adapt to the West? The real question is, can the West remember why it exists? When young people in Western societies say they're scared of the future, they're really saying they don't know what future they're building toward. Technology moves fast, culture changes every week, but there's no shared compass. And that's where faith, any genuine faith, can play a role again. This doesn't mean turning Western countries into religious states. It means realizing that human beings need something deeper than entertainment or profit. They need meaning. They need purpose. And for millions of Muslims living in the West, faith already gives them that, a daily rhythm of prayer, charity, community, and hope. But integration can't be one-sided. Western societies have to stop treating faith as a threat, and Muslims have to stop seeing the West as a temptation. There's a middle ground, a society that values both conscience and freedom. The British philosopher Roger Scruton once said that freedom without virtue eventually destroys itself. That's where Western culture stands now, incredibly free, but uncertain what to do with that freedom. In the presence of Muslims reminds it that moral responsibility doesn't have to disappear just because society is modern. So, how do we move forward? First, by rebuilding trust. Muslims need to show, not through debate but through example, that their faith is compatible with compassion, education, and civic life. Western institutions must also stop seeing Muslims through the lens of fear or politics. Most Muslims aren't radicals or outsiders, they're neighbors, citizens, and contributors. Second, by restoring purpose in education. When Western schools teach only skills but not values, students grow up knowing how to make a living but not how to live. Reintroducing moral philosophy, cultural history, and open dialogue about faith can help rebuild that sense of meaning. Third, by creating communities that connect people again. Because loneliness, not religion, is the real epidemic in the West. When people feel seen, valued, and part of something larger than themselves, fear disappears. Muslims and non-Muslims alike can work together toward that goal. Then the West's future won't be defined by fear or division, but by renewal. Yes, there will always be differences, but diversity doesn't have to mean disunity. It can mean balance, the spiritual depth of the East meeting the freedom and creativity of the West. The poet Muhammad Iqbal once said, "Nations are born in the hearts of poets. They prosper and die in the hands of politicians." Maybe it's time for Western civilization to listen to new poets, not just the ones who write verses, but the ones who live with conviction, humility, and faith. Because the West doesn't need to be saved from Islam, it needs to be saved from its own emptiness. And Muslims living here, if they can live with integrity, kindness, and wisdom, might just help remind his civilization what the soul of a society really looks like. That's the future worth believing in, one where faith and freedom walk side by side, not as enemies, but as partners in building a world that still has meaning.